Miller. Hi, Anthony. How are you?
I'm good, Eric. How you doing? Appreciate being on the show.
Oh, anytime. So let's first explain uh, what the UFL is, because some listeners might not know. Um, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so the UFL is a spring football league that basically is a combination of the XFL and the USFL combining together. The USFL has been in existence since 2022. With the at least the new iteration of it, the XFL started back in 2020, rebooted again with The Rock and Danny Garcia and Redbird Capital in 2023. Both leagues decided to merge together because they felt that competing against each other was also going to end up killing each other off. So they wanted to make sure that they had a united front to make spring football survive. So they decided to merge together with 8 teams, four from the USFL side and four from the XFL side, and uh, so far they've finished their regular season. They played through 10 games, and now we have the playoff games this weekend. On the USFL conference side is going to be the Michigan Panthers and the Birmingham Stallions. On the XFL side, we got the San Antonio Brahmas and the St. Louis Battlehawks.
Uh, what do you think the difference is between not playing style, but like level of play between the UFL and the two leagues last year?
I think the level of play has definitely improved. I think it's been the strongest it's been since the USFL back in the 80s. That was kind of the big thing with bringing the leagues together with the merger. It went from essentially 16 teams combined to dropping to 8. So you have all that talent left over from the 8 teams that didn't survive and were able to join the 8 that did survive. And I think at the end of the day, it did add for better quality on the field. I mean, we've definitely seen the quarterback play improve. I think it's probably the best we've ever seen the quarterbacks play within spring football. And then obviously, I think the kickers have really improved their game as well. So I think the overall talent is a lot better than it has been, and I think it's the strongest it's been in the modern spring football era. So I'm really excited about how the league can continue to build and bring in talent from the college level to maybe some that are still in the NFL level that might be getting cut and joining this league, but the talent level overall has been spectacular compared to what it has been, and I think this was the main reason why the merger came together and it's made it work is because there were right now at that point there was an oversaturation of teams and maybe the talent level wasn't as great as they could have been, but now with the 8 teams of the merger together, the talent level is outstanding, and hopefully they can grow from that as they slowly start thinking about expansion into maybe from 8 to 10, from 10 to 12. So hopefully this will be they'll keep growing on the talent that they have now. But the 8 teams they have, there's a lot more talent on these 8 teams than I think we've seen over the last you know 2 to 3 decades of spring football.
Do you think the development plan for players has changed, or did they, with the merger, did they form a better development plan for the players, or like, yeah, I'm having trouble formulating that, but do you kind of get where I'm
Yeah,
going with that?
yeah. I would say I think the coaching has gotten better. I think the players have also gotten better too. I think there is a different talent level than that we see in the modern day football that we didn't see 30, 40 years ago. I mean, back in the 80s, it was very rare to see a mobile quarterback. You had your Randall Cunninghams and you had the Steve Youngs, but there just wasn't many of the mobile quarterbacks. Today, quarterbacks are way more athletic than they were in the past. And I think you've seen that here in the UFL with guys like Jordan Teamu and Adrian Martinez, the and the guys like that, Chase Garbers, that's what I was trying to think of. But these are guys that can use their legs, they can be mobile and make plays on the run. So, and I do think the coaching has gotten stronger too. I think there's a lot of I think it's the same thing for the players. There's coaches out there that need to be given the opportunity, and when they're given the opportunity to call the offense or defensive plays or have a chance to be a head coach, they can find themselves succeeding. You look at someone like Anthony Beck, who's never been a head coach until he took over the St. Louis Battlehawks, and look what he's done with that team. I mean, how many players have gone on to play in the NFL because of him, or gotten NFL tryouts because of him? And that was a guy that at most he was a tight ends coach, and he was able to get his opportunity to be a head coach. You look at someone like AJ Smith. He got his opportunity to be the offense coordinator for the San Antonio Brahmas, and look what he's done with the Roughnecks last year, and in San Antonio this year. He has one of the most creative electric offenses in the league. So I think more, is just as important on the coaching side, from than the player side is, you know, these guys are getting their opportunities to show their talent, and I think a lot of that development comes from the coaches. So, yeah, I would definitely say the development is better than it's been, but it also goes to there's a different type of player that plays football that we didn't see 30, 40 years ago. So I think that makes a difference.
Can you see the UFL being almost like a minor league? No, I know it's not affiliated with the league, but I guess uh, an unaffiliated minor league for like specifically coaches, where if they're doing well in the UFL, do you think they might get a chance in the NFL?
I think it's going to accidentally be that. I don't think that's what the league really wants. That's not the vision that they're trying to go for. I know Daryl Johnson's talked about it multiple times that he wants the UFL to stand on its own. They know they can't compete with the NFL, so no, they're not looking to take down the National Football League, but they are looking to be their own league. Like they don't want to be known as, oh, you can come play here for 1 year and then get into the NFL. They want to be able to develop their own talent and be able to have guys that can develop careers in the UFL and have their own stories. So I think it will be the unofficial minor league. I think for players and coaches, that's just how it's going to end up being. It may not be what the league wants, but I think it will end up being, going in that direction. I'm sure over the years we're going to start to see less and less players get opportunities to play in the NFL, and will have to develop a career in the UFL. And I don't think the UFL will mind that as long as they have, top talent there. So. It will be a minor league, but at the end of the day, they're not trying to be the minor league. They're trying to be its own league, and the NFL has the fall, and the UFL wants to control the spring.
Is there any way that eventually it could become a developmental league to the point where guys come out of high school and get the option either to go to college or play in the UFL?
I think if the NIL didn't exist in college, I would say absolutely yes, because that was something that was really big with the USFL back in the 80s, was that they were able to get guys like Herschel Walker, who played 1 or 2 years in college and then ended up going ahead and playing in the USFL to get that experience with the pros before heading to the NFL. So I think it used to be that way. I think NIL has kind of ruined that, where I think the reality is football players are going to get paid more in college than they are in the pros. I mean, in the UFL, the average salary, I think these guys are getting maybe 60, 65,000, around that per year. In college, there's guys that can make millions of dollars, just from playing with LSU or Alabama. Now, you might be able to get, maybe 2 or 3 star players that may not get NIL, and you might be able to be able to attract them to go play in the UFL. I think that's definitely possible, but you're not going to get top talent. Like you're not going to get the 5 star recruits that are going to skip college to go play in the UFL. So I think the reality of NIL has kind of ruined that idea for the UFL, and I think the UFL has to focus more on one thing they've been doing really well, and the XFL was very big on this. They went after historically black college athletes. They were looking at Division II players. Like that's where they got to find it. If you can find that diamond in the rough in Division II or in FCS. I think that's where you're going to make your mark, is you'll be able to develop superstars out of those guys, because there's some really good players who don't play Division One and play in other divisions. You look at Luis Perez. He played for Texas A&M Commerce. That's a Division two school, and look what he's done. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So the UFL's got to. I think what they need to do well is recruit and find talent within FCS, within Division two, Division three, and start developing players from there. Because at the end of the day, the reality is they may not be good enough to play in the NFL, but they're good enough to star and shine in the UFL. So that's where they're going to make their mark.
I mean, are these at least for the coaches in UFL, are the contracts guaranteed, or it's not like the NFL? Are they not able to back that? Where if the contract are the coaches just on single year contracts, or are they on multi year contracts? And if they get let go, are they still paid? Oh, like are okay.
Yeah.
I'll
So
cut off.
Yeah, so originally the coaches signed multi-year contracts, but with the merger, there was a difference in salary between the XFL and the USFL coaches. So the XFL coaches were actually getting, I think, about $100,000 more than what the USFL coaches were getting. So starting next year, from my understanding, from what Mike Mitchell has been reporting is, or has been saying is. There's going to be a decrease in the pay, I believe, unless they come up with some agreement and change it. But I think they want to cut on what they're paying the head coaches, which could bring up a really interesting offseason when you look at guys like Bob Stoops and Anthony Beck and Reggie Barlow. Do those guys end up coming back, or do they end up leaving? That was a big thing with Hines Ward with the San Antonio Brahmas. That's one of the main reasons why he left, was because he wanted to keep his salary, and he was not going to be able to get that if he would have past next season. So that's why he ended up leaving. So I'm not sure if the USFL coaches are going to have to re-sign as well at the end of the season, but I know the XFL coaches are going to have to sign new agreements, and it may end up being what the USFL coaches were getting, which is less money. So that will bring an interesting dynamic in the offseason on how the UFL is going to handle those coaching contracts with the eight that they currently have.
Uh, how are the broadcasting deals like? Are they gonna stay the same, or is there any chance of expansion with like another network coming in to do
Uh,
that, to
yeah,
broadcast?
I doubt there's going to be any kind of expansion. Fox is a co-owner of this league. Disney is invested in this league as well, so they're more than likely going to stick with Fox and ABC and ESPN as the broadcasting crews. Is there ever a possibility that CBS and NBC can be involved? I mean, maybe, but I seriously doubt at this point. I mean, NBC was involved in the USFL the last two seasons, and the ratings were actually better on NBC than it was on Fox. But I don't know if NBC would ever put their hat in the ring again to broadcast spring football. So I would probably say it would be safe to assume that it's probably just strictly going to be Fox and ABC and ESPN broadcasting with in the near future and probably beyond.
Okay, that's good to know. And is there any like rule changes? Well, I know we're still in the season, but is there any interesting rule changes or like expansion of the behind the scenes that you know of coming?
I don't know if any rule changes that would come next year. I would say the one rule to probably watch out for is the kickoff rule. They decided this year to go with the USFL one, which is kind of similar to what the NFL has been using, except they backed it up from kicking at their own 20-yard line, which
Mm.
presented opportunities for more kick returns. Which we have seen a good amount of kick returns this year, but the NFL obviously changed their kickoff rule this offseason to adopt what the XFL was doing last year. So I would not be surprised if this offseason the UFL decides to go back to the XFL kickoff rule because, in my opinion, I think the reason why they went with the USFL kickoff rule this year is this was before the NFL was changing the rules on the kickoff, and I think they wanted to give guys tape that shows that they can perform and they can run down the field just like the NFL kickoff rules. I think they were trying to adapt more to what the NFL is like with having their own twist to it. But obviously now the NFL is adopting the XFL kickoff rules, so I would say there's a pretty good possibility they consider and move to the XFL kickoff rule again next year. That would be the only one that I could possibly think of that they would consider changing.
I think it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. The XFL kickoff rule turns out with the NFL. If players are going to like that better, or if they're going to end up going back after a year uh, of just the test run
Yeah,
of it.
Yeah, I think the main reason why the NFL is going with this kickoff rule is good. The XFL has proven that it's a safer rule. It's safer for the players. They don't have to run down and have the collisions that they have. The concussion protocol is really big, and head injuries is really big with the NFL right now. They want to make sure they try to reduce it as much as possible in the with the XFL kickoff rule, not only is it going to have less collisions, but you're going to have more kick returns. It was, I believe, 93% of the kickoffs were returned in the XFL last year. That's the type of numbers that you want. With the NFL, how it's been the last couple of years, it's almost a non-existent play. It's almost like, what's the point of having it? Because there weren't many returns happening. So this is just a good combo of having the kickoff become a more important aspect of football again, but also protecting the players and their health.
And I had a question and it slipped me. But with the health side of things, do you see the possibility of the NFL getting rid of the punt and maybe adopting the automatic 4th and 15 rule where they get the chance to go for it, but it's a little extra distance for them?
I think for the onside, I would say, yeah, I definitely think it's a possibility. It has been trying to push on for a while. I think it was the Philadelphia Eagles that tried to submit that rule into get approved. So it's definitely building traction with the NFL, where there are more teams that are getting behind that and wanting to have that onside kick option instead. Will it eventually get to that point? I definitely think so. I mean, if the XFL kickoff rule ends up working out for the NFL, I mean, they're definitely gonna probably consider that as well, which is gonna that's a huge thing for the UFL is they're able to experiment with rules and be able to get creative with it. And if it ends up working, great, then the NFL will adopt, and if it's not, then oh well, then it didn't work. So this is just another really good invention by the league that I think eventually the NFL will consider, but I do think it may depend on how the XFL kickoff rule works in the NFL. If they end up really liking that, then they'll look at other rules in the NFL because I think another thing too is the transparency of of the referees and how they're reviewing. I think that's something the NFL is eventually going to have to adopt as well because fans want that transparency. They want to know what the officials are talking about. They want to know why they're coming up with the ruling that they have. That's something that every week everyone has been praising. Whether it's on the broadcast or you know pro football, whoever, Mike Florio's praised it like a lot. There's a lot of media out there that want that to be implemented in the NFL as well. So I think there's a few rules that the UFL has that I think the NFL is eventually gonna adopt.
I mean, with the NFL adopting these rules, do you think that by protecting the players, do you think that could actually like weaken the quality of the game because you're not going to get the hard hits, even though they're completely trying to protect the players. But do you think the game will change substantially?
I think the days of the big hits and the head to head hits are over. I think
Hmm.
that was something that was done in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. That type of play is non-existent anymore. Like that's something they're trying to move away from. So I think having these type of rules like the XFL kickoff rule that is safer and will protect the players, I think the NFL is always going to consider those type of rules. They have to protect their investments. They have to, there's been a lot of rule changes involving, protecting the quarterbacks and making sure that defensive players are not hitting them low and, tearing their ACL like what happened to Tom Brady when he was with the Patriots. They can't have those type of hits like that. So the physicality of the game is definitely a lot different. I think it's more about the football players have to have the mental capacity of it. They need to be smarter about how they're doing things. So I think the mental game is just as important now as the physical game because the physicality of the game is, um, decreasing from what it was 10, 20 years ago.
With what you said about the transparency of the referees, I, I don't know if the NFL can do that because they have so many games going on at once. So, would they be able to, if there's two plays that need to be challenged going on at the same time, would they be able to have the refs talking back and forth with the league office uh, for both games, for like both plays from two different games?
Um,
Like, how
the
would they balance
NFL,
that?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think the NFL is a multi-billion dollar company that I think can probably figure it out. I don't know how the logistics of it is going to work, but they need to have that transparency. There's too many times where we've seen really bad calls and we don't have good explanations. Even the next day, when they
Mhm.
release why they did it, it's not it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to be able to talk about on the air at that time, be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is why we made the ruling we did. Fans want that transparency. It's really important to
Mhm.
know. And look, sometimes the football rules can be kind of complicated at times. And I think if you
Mhm.
have somebody like a Dean Blandino or Mike Pereira who can explain it on the air and use layman terms so that the average football fan can understand it. I think that's important to have. So logistically, I don't know how it works, but it is something that I think the NFL has to consider having because it's going to make the fan experience better and it's going to have fans trust the game of football and trust the league a lot more.
The problem is the, a lot of penalties are judgment calls, so they differ from ref to ref. They need, in my opinion, they need to figure out how to streamline things so it's less judgment and it's the same across the board.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's always going to be a human element to the game, so mistakes are
Mm-hmm.
going to be made. But the one thing I do think the UFL has done a really good job of is their super challenge rule this year that each coach has one super challenge that they can challenge whatever they want. They can challenge a penalty, they can challenge a turnover, they can challenge whatever they want on a play, and I think that's something that the NFL should consider implementing as well as we saw last week in the St. Louis Battlehawks San Antonio Brahmas game, AJ McCarron told Anthony Beck to challenge the 2 point conversion that San Antonio guy, saying that they had an illegal man down the field, and they ended up winning that challenge and took 2 points off the board, and San Antonio ended up losing that game. So I think that type of challenge I think can help alleviate some of the issues. But at the end of the day, I mean, unless you're going to be like, baseball and start having robot umpires, there's always going to be a human element to the NFL and football in general. So it's never going to be perfect, but you can try to offset the issues as best you can without messing with the timing of the games. Because if you start challenging everything, then games are going to be 3+ hours, and nobody wants that. People want to be 3 hours or less, and that's what
Yeah.
these football leagues want to get to.
Could you see them maybe on top of having the human element, maybe having robot or some kind of digital ref?
I mean, the UFL already kind of does it with how they measure first downs. I mean, that's done, electronically, where they bring
Mm.
up the screen and they use technology to measure the first down instead of having chains do it. So the technology is going to get more involved in the NFL and in football in general in the next 5, 10, 15 years. They're going to start developing technology for it. I don't know if it's going to go as far as like coming up with like robot officials that are making calls, but or is AI going to be used in some capacity to be able to jump in and be like, hey, there's a wrong call made, change it now. I don't know how much is going to change in that aspect. I think you got to be careful with that because fans still want the human element to it, and if you make it too robotic and AI, then I don't know if it's going to appeal to fans as often or as much as as much as you want. So there's a balancing act there. So I mean, who knows? I mean, the game could definitely look a lot different 10, 20 years from now. You if you look back on 2000, the year 2000 versus now, the game is so different 20 years ago than what it is now. So definitely a lot can change.
I mean, I've heard that the NFL is considering the getting rid of the chains, the current way of chains, and going electronic, which I think would, which would eliminate the whole. Was it Gene Steratore who used the note card like
Yeah.
20 years ago? Yeah, that would eliminate that.
Yeah, I mean
But
the UFL does it. I mean they don't have chains. They use electronics for their downs. So I think it makes all the sense, and you just have to change his backups just in case technology goes down. You have the backup manual chains that you can use. But I mean, again, like the UFL has been using this type of technology to try to enhance the game and make it easier and as simple as possible. And I mean, the NFL is going to keep adopting these type of changes, and the UFL is going to have to be the league that is creative and innovative. I mean, they have to try to change the game, for the better. You don't want to get too crazy with it, but their innovation is a big reason why the NFL looks the way it does today. Even back when the XFL in 2001, I mean, we didn't have the Sky Cam until the XFL did in 2001. So there's a lot that these leagues, these spring leagues like the UFL are doing to better the game and better the broadcasting experience for fans.
did the XFL or UFL take the? I forget which one had um the 1, 2, and 3 point conversions after touchdowns. Did they take that from the CFL?
So that was the XFL started doing that in 2020. That was part of the rule change that they do the 1, 2, or 3 point conversion. So I don't know if that came from the CFL, but um, that's something the XFL has been implementing for the last 3 to 4 years in the 2 seasons they had. So that I mean that could be a possibility for the NFL too, to eliminate the extra point, and that was part of the reason the NFL pushed back the extra point, was that kicking it from the inside the 10 yard line was just way too easy for teams, and it became an automatic play. Now with the extra point being at about the 30, 35 yard line, it makes it a little bit more challenging, but kickers are getting better, so it's still a play that is a high percentage that they'll score the point. So I think eventually the NFL should consider too putting in the 1, 2, or 3 point conversion to kind of spice it up and make it different and make that point after that much bigger of a play than what it is now.
But at the same time, isn't that risking more injuries? So they're trying to make the game safer. Wouldn't that be kind of counterintuitive to what they're trying to do with the safety of the game?
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, that is a good point, but at the end of the day, too, they got to put in an exciting product, and offense sells. I mean, people like
Mm-hmm.
quarterbacks, people like offense. It sells a lot of money, and nothing against kickers. Kickers are human beings too, but a lot of people, don't find kickers and punters as exciting as the offense and defense going after each other. So there is an entertainment aspect to it too, where if you're doing the point after from the 2, 5, or 10 yard line, yes, there's still a physical part of the game there, but it's not like you have to run down 50, 60, 70 yards down the field. It's a shorter field, so it's still relatively safer than like a kickoff where you still have to run how the NFL did it last year is run down the field on kickoff. So there's still a shorter field, so it's still a little bit safer, but there's still some physicality to it, which you got to keep some of it in the game.
Uh, is there? This would be a really weird way to do it, but is there a way that they could do where they just do quarterback, receivers, and DBs on the field? Because the offensive and defensive line, they already take enough hits, so that's where I was going with the more chance at risk at injury. Is there a way they take the lines off the field and just do the skill position against the skill position? So corner against receiver and see who wins.
Yeah, 7-on-7 would be interesting. I think that would be an interesting aspect to do. Would fans and would the NFL go for it? Maybe, but I mean, it's out of the box thinking, and I like the creativity with it. I just don't know if I mean at the end of the day, the NFL or football in general it's 11-on-11 or 12-on-12
Mm-hmm.
in some leagues, but it's there's still that element to it too. So I mean, definitely a possibility. I mean, it would make it safer and you know less hits taken by the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, could definitely be a possibility.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that's all I have. So, thank you so much for your time. Uh, Thank you everybody for listening, and have a good night. Oh, and